won't say a time, but.
Well, I thought it was my same wrong word, where it's supposed to automatically adjust to the.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Ready, Larry?
Well, let's see.
You're on.
Okay. It's over there then.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
No, I thought we've all been punished for the quarter.
That's what it feels like.
Welcome everyone, and it's good to see everybody again. So,
Put your mic down, please. Thank you.
I'm just making sure they're not. Okay, still got a pretty bad feedback. That's off, so that shouldn't be a problem.
Just bring it closer to you.
It's still pretty bad.
Okay, go ahead.
There you go. Okay. Well, welcome everyone, and to our, so I guess it'd be June's regular meeting during the COVID time. So I will go ahead. I've been asked to read the full agenda. So I guess I'll just start from the top and go down. So the Utility Advisory Committee agenda, regular meeting, Council Chamber 401 California Avenue, Boulder City, Nevada, June 24th, 2020. And today we're having the meeting at 3:30. And I guess to make sure that we're all aware, my understanding is we need to be done by 6 o'clock. So this will be one of our probably shortest meetings that we've had. So, pursuant to Section 3 of the Declaration of Emergency, Directive 006, there will be no in-person attendance at this meeting. The public may view the meeting live at the following link: https://www.bcnv.org/191/live-stream-video. For information regarding Directive 006, see the following. Okay, http://gov.nevada.gov/news/emergency. Then, if this is correct, there's 2 spaces, orders/2020/2020-03-22 space COVID-19 space declaration space of emergency space directive space 006 /. Extension of Directive 006 have been included in Section 6 of Directive 16, Section 23 of Directive 18, and currently Section 37 of Directive 21 found at the following link: https://nv.gov/wp-content/uploads/2020/05 directive-021-phase-2-reopening-plan.pdf. Items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. 2 or more items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed, or related discussions may be delayed at any time. So right now, we'll do the public comment. I guess I'll read it. Well, is there any public comment? Have we received any emails, phone calls?
We have not received,
Is there anybody on the line?
Do we need to show the call-in number?
Yeah, we're gonna do that, but he wanted to know if there was any emails.
No, there's not.
Okay, we got it here.
Okay.
And so Larry, if you can just read out the call-in number as well.
Okay, so the call-in number is 702-589-9229. Sorry, 9. So let me read it. 702 58996. Somebody has it. Hello?
Yes, I'm calling in for public comment.
Is that Fred Volz?
It is.
How you
Yes,
doing,
Larry.
Fred?
Hello. Good afternoon, committee.
How you doing?
Good. Should I go ahead, or do we
Yeah.
need to do anything else first?
You can go ahead.
All right, great. My comments pertain to agenda items 3 and 4. At last night's city council meeting, the city manager made a report of the city's May 2020 financial statements. After allowing for reserves and restricted funds, over $25 million is categorized as available for the utilities line item on the cash by fund page. These numbers play into the utility fund's capital projects update as of 5/31/2020 that's on your agenda tonight or this afternoon. You'll recall that more than $20 million of budgeted but unspent utility capital projects have disappeared from the various iterations of this spreadsheet. There still has been no reconciliation of the whereabouts of this money previously collected from ratepayers. And it would seem that before this committee can adequately assess utility capital projects, present or future, it should know with reasonable certainty the available funds from the past. Given the City Council's recent 6-month freeze on new capital projects, it's surprising that there's been no update to the fiscal year 2021 project plans, reflecting lower spending if new projects only incur half a year's spending in fiscal year 21. An accounting of how the $9.95 million of fiscal year 2021 projects will change needs to be provided to this committee, and if projects already in the works will be finished sooner because there are fewer competing demands for project management time and resources. And I'll submit these comments to be added verbatim to the record through the link that's listed on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments out there?
Yeah, sometimes there's a little bit of delay, so
We'll give it a few
wait
time.
a minute or so on
Sure,
as
thanks.
far as calling. Yeah, there is actually, I think it's about a minute, right? Yeah.
Should we do the, do we need to get the Jeopardy theme song in here?
We need something, otherwise it's just quiet and we're staring at each other.
You know what we should do? We should start the clock and let it run. When it goes 2 minutes or 3 minutes, then that's good. Good. Comments are closed.
How about this, we go to 3:39 on that clock?
Okay.
That work?
Well, if we have a time limit to getting out of here by 6,
Do you want me to read the full agenda? Do you want me to read all the agenda items before we start, or just go through them?
No, we can just go through them unless there's some changes.
I don't think, so I was just talking while we're waiting, so I guess we're ready to call it good.
Yep, I think we're good.
So, okay, so close the first comment period, and we will go to the agenda items. Is there any committee member that has any concerns or would like to rearrange the items at all? Okay, hearing none, then we will start for possible action, approval of the minutes of March 4th, 2020 and March 9th, 2020 meetings. And so just for the record, The March 4th was a regular meeting, the March 9th was a workshop. And I don't have any, surprisingly.
Well,
Good.
I'm
I don't have any
hoping
comments.
we did a little bit of better job of condensing and summarizing and shortening them up. And hopefully we have less mistakes.
I was very happy with it, so I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Anybody have any comments? Does anybody see anything? So thank you all for that was a great effort, and I appreciate it. And it worked really well, sending back and forth and getting little tweaks. We had a few tweaks, but
Right.
it worked great, and I appreciate it. Okay. So then I guess I need to make a motion to approve both March 4th and March, do you want to do them separately or just combine them? Is that okay?
Combine them.
Okay, then, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for March 4th and the minutes for March 9th. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. And all ayes? Any nays? Okay, so my understanding that it's a unanimous pass. So appreciate that. So I guess the only reason is there any reason we need to go to the Capitol if the two city employees would like to, because the 3 and 4, I'm assuming, is the city employees. Do we want to go through that first to give them a break to do something else? Dennis?
No, because we would have had to done it before we approved the agenda.
Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, so then I'll let you start on the presentation for the solar service agreement between the city and town site of solar.
Yes,
LLC.
yep. So just a little bit of background on this item. Way back when, we leased property to a company by the name of Korean Western Power Company for a solar land lease. Koapa, or whatever they're called. The lease was converted to an option agreement, and it was transferred to Skylar Resources in 2015. There were numerous extensions. In one of those extensions, there was negotiated a solar, essentially an energy rate of $39.95 per megawatt hour, based on a specific schedule. So when they complete their project, which is probably in 2022, then they would start delivering that amount of energy.
I'm sorry, Dennis. I'm hoping I didn't space it. But you said it originally, because I think that was one of the things that I wasn't completely understanding. It was definitely turned over from the one company to
the other.
So the option was put back out there, and the town site is what picked it up.
And town site picked it up, and when they revised that option, that's when they included the 5 megawatts at that rate.
At that time, okay. And then I guess, so we'll get to it, I'm sorry, but there seems to be, I guess, did they do the original contract under Skylar? Or is it Skylar is one part of this company and Town Site Solar is another?
So I'm digging into that a little bit just because I'm not as clear on that as well, because they've also been purchased now by a company called Capital Dynamics. So, but it feels like they're keeping the Town Site LLC name. So that's one of those items I'm going to verify
Okay.
after this meeting. But
Okay, sorry.
I've got a question on that. If you know, do you know what the size of the parcel is that they've leased and what the annual per acre fee they're paying to the city is? If you don't know, that's okay, but
I believe it's 1,100 acres. I don't remember the fee, but I can find that out easy enough.
I was just curious. Thank you.
It's actually that annual. You can actually the acreage won't be shown, but in our annual CAFR, you can go find it. But I can get it for you.
Is that being collected now, or will it be effective when they go into operation?
I think they had some different options.
They may have some kind of a lower price until they get into it.
What they did, I believe, on the previous, and this is really Brock's world, not mine, but I believe what they did on previous options, because some of these projects, it takes them a while to get their PPAs in line, and it takes them a while to get the design done, and so I believe they pay a certain amount.
Right, that's what I would think.
And then it goes up to the total amount
when they get into production.
They get in there.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
but we can certainly have Brock elaborate on that if we need to in the future. Just to get in a little more background on this, because I was actually unaware of this until recently, so it was kind of a little bit of a surprise. So with regards to this, we circled back with SNWA, because if you remember right, we were going to be looking at 8 megawatts from SNWA at a cheaper rate. But given that this was already basically done, we asked them just to go back and model this with 3 megawatts from SNWA and include this. Again, this one's a little more costly, but the overall savings is still between $100,000 and $150,000 a year when we have them both online. So
So what's the, instead of 8 megawatts, we're getting 3 to 5?
we'll be getting 8 total.
Oh, okay.
So we'll get 3 eventually from SNWA.
SNWA and then 5 from
and-
the, oh, okay, good,
yeah,
thank you.
So I included the agreement in the package and was really intending on just giving the information that I gave. The chairman called me yesterday, had some concerns and questions about some of the technical and energy and even some legal in that agreement. So what I'm asking of this committee is if you guys have questions, if you can email them, because in some cases it's different people that I need to talk to get those answers. So, and I wasn't able to between yesterday and today. So,
I remember SNWA saying they still have a problem getting the transmission corridor through that commercial development. Has that been solved?
I believe they have resolved that. I know Brock was working with them and they found a solution.
Good, thank you.
And they did have a number of options. Some were more expensive than others, but I think they came up with the least cost option. So
Thanks.
I haven't actually heard back from them since, other than on having this discussion on modeling. So I'm not exactly sure where their project is. Certainly hasn't come back to city council yet. So I would expect to see that probably by the end of this year. I know the town site project, this project, we're starting to get hydrology studies. They're starting to figure out how they're going to get their backup power to their control building, and I believe they're planning on having battery storage as well. And then they got to get their water down there for fire suppression. So that tells me that they're moving forward, and I would expect them to be going to construction maybe spring of next year. I think that project's going to be a little interesting, this one, because it splits that I-11 corridor, and so you can see them out in the distance, but these ones you're going to see, they're going to be right there, so it'll be interesting.
So we don't get in trouble in the future. I hope the water line they're going to do for fire suppression is 18-inch from where the line ended on this side of the I-11 corridor, and they go underneath the I-11 into their property. It should be 18-inch all the way past their property line.
They haven't submitted that info yet. So.
Make sure that when they submit it, that we double check and read it.
Well, what they're required to do is submit a hydraulic study with the modeling analysis, and then they use the max day plus fire, and that's how they do it. I don't know what size it is because we haven't seen that yet.
We just finished a debacle on running an 18-inch line from our reservoir 2025 underneath the highway, underneath the railroad tracks, parallel to Boulder City Parkway. They turned the corner. They went all the way past the PIV station. And if they drop it any lower than 18-inch, because of their hydraulic studies, we got ourselves a bottleneck.
Yeah, I actually think they're going to use a different alignment, but I haven't seen it. They're actually going to come from the treatment plant underneath I-11.
That's affluent water. That's just a temporary. I'm talking about their permanent fire suppression.
They're talking about coming down by the treatment plant.
We don't have enough water capacity down that direction.
Okay.
We just went through that. But I'm saying we need to keep track of that because I've looked at this contract. This contract's got some problems.
So
And so that's one thing why we're here tonight to talk about.
Yep.
That contract has a water issue? I didn't catch that in there. So.
No, that's normally not where we put that information. They usually submit additional studies off-site for their off-site improvements.
What they do is they'll go in and they'll do a modeling like what he's talking about of what they need for water capacity for firefighting. Okay, and that's it. What I'm saying is Boulder City, through contributions from the solar companies down in the valley, have put money towards and paid for an 18-inch water line extension that stops on this side of I-11. This company is going to be building on that right away. If they do not extend that water line at 18 inches past their property and then tap onto that for their fire protection, we have just shot ourselves in the foot for anything we're going to do on farther down El Dorado Valley for water, for a secondary line.
Yeah, let's put that down in the capital. I think it's going to come up in the capital issue. It'll be something we want to discuss.
Well, and it wouldn't be anything we'd pay
future.
for. They would be required to pay for.
Well, I guess that, but if I'm understanding what Greg is, what we want to make sure it is paid for by them, because the El Dorado line is confusing to what is being paid for from the water revenues and what's being paid for otherwise.
Right.
So I think if I'm understanding correctly, these are things that we want to make sure in the capital that we understand what needs to be done and where the money's coming from. It just makes it a lot easier.
Yep, and my plan was to spend a little more time on the water and sewer today, since you hadn't seen it rolled up into costs.
Okay.
You just saw the projects when Brown and Caldwell was here. So.
Okay. Greg, was that?
That won't fall under capital because this project will be built before we hit the water line to El Dorado Valley in our capital program.
But if I'm saying is if we can start discussions on capital, then hopefully we can flush it out, and that's an area we can discuss it. Unfortunately, we can't. It doesn't fit in this contract agenda, but it might fit on the capital. Is what I'm trying to get at.
But and they what will happen is there'll be a separate agreement for the water. All of the solar companies have a separate agreement for the water.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things that can be a little more confusing, is we have at least 2 contracts now. So is there a third, or is it, because you have the original contract that allows for the option or the building of the solar plant, and this is a separate.
And then the water will be a new one as well. And then if they do take temporary effluent, there'll be 2 more.
Okay, so I totally agree that we want it. I've just got to find where to put it.
Well, that's
in the
where.
agenda.
Well, that's what it would come in from. We would bring that in front of the committee when it was drafted. The water.
Right. I guess the biggest concern though is so far we've seen it late instead of early, and we haven't really been able to.
Yeah. Well, we haven't until the last couple of weeks. We really haven't heard much on the infrastructure side of town site.
Oh, okay. So. Yeah, because it's confusing with it being that the contract is July 14th is when they're showing the effective date. So that's another thing, is how much time do we really have to, can it be changed, or is it just a courtesy that we're seeing it? That's,
I guess, really mostly a courtesy, but I think I'm more than happy to respond to the questions for sure.
Okay.
And if there's items that are significant, we'll address them.
Okay.
So, anything you guys see, if you can just email, because there's different folks we need to talk to get some of those answers. And then, no, I believe are you talking further south? The further south one, I believe, is Copper Mountain.
Okay.
3, 4, or 5.
This is more, okay.
This one's really, actually, I can show. This is the airport.
Right.
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
Straddles I-11.
Oh, okay, so that's what you mean. So it is right on I-11 then.
So,
The other one I'm talking about is more south.
yeah, so
It's right in there, yes.
these guys in here, I know they're.
It's right, right before Dry Lake and so forth.
The Dry Lake is the last phase of that project.
Okay, because there's a lot
Then
of-
farther south is Copper Mountain 6.
Okay.
They're grading between the end of the steam plant property and Searchlight.
Yep.
Okay, because I was just down there over the weekend, so.
This one, Black Hills South, that's the one that we're working with on the water authority on. This is Black Hills North. It's currently, I believe, getting appraisals done.
And then down by the steam plant, we've got Copper Mountain 6.
So if you really wanted a in-depth history of those, we would probably need to have Brock show up at a future meeting, and he could do that.
Are the lease
Certainly.
are the lease payments on these new leases going to be higher than the old ones? Really?
Yeah,
That's good.
I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe they're coming in around $1,500 or $1,600 an acre.
That's good. Well, we got to be generating enough money from these leases. We ought to be able to offset some of these city costs, I hope, somehow. These annual
Well,
ongoings.
it certainly does already, because that lease revenue, I believe, is around $10 million a year to the general fund.
We need some of that in the utility fund, though.
Well, I certainly won't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Did you have a question, George?
I had a bunch of questions. So it was 11,000 acres? It went by a bit fast.
1,100.
Oh, 1,100. Okay. And so 8 megawatts, is that, because Boulder City, if you take the 160 million kilowatt hours a year that we use, that would average to 16 megawatts constant consumption. So that's about half of our consumption. Or is it 8 megawatts of capacity?
It's 8 megawatts of capacity, and then the Water Authority, if I understand right, has based it on it be delivering when it's available, when the sun's out. It's the 5 megawatts is based on that schedule that's attached.
So it'd be more
That's another question that Larry asked. So I believe we can dig up that get those calculations and show them to everybody.
So maybe 20% of our electricity would now come from solar or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
It's
the
about-
capacity, but the energy, solar's only about a 10 or 15, 20% resource. So
Yeah.
because the sun only is,
Well, it depends on what time of the year you're talking, right?
right,
So,
peak of the time and only so many hours a day.
I think it's 30 more. It's bigger than that, I think, the capacity factor for solar. It's maybe 25% or something like that, but I don't know.
But we'll get that info out of the SNWA model, and we can get that percentage. So, because I think people are going to want to know that answer, because people are going to like that we're getting solar.
So it's going to, and what's it going to replace? Because our energy usage isn't going up.
Mostly the market purchases. It's
Of natural gas then, or what?
yeah, yes. So
Okay.
the SNWA has I don't know if you remember, but when SSEA/SNWA were here, they just discussed a little bit of how they manage those market purchases, and how they do the scheduling and delivery.
So then we'd get our hydro at night, maybe, or because if the solar's
when it changes as the year changes. So
that might put a lot of pressure on Hoover, because I think everyone now is wanting electricity at night, California and so on. But I'm all for it. I mean, I'm just thinking aloud.
yeah, I think I read an article that California was now paying people to use. Take that back. That was on water. They're paying people to not use water on Sundays.
And my other one more was, what are their production costs? How much does it cost them to produce this electricity?
That I don't know.
I think that'd be worth knowing, because after all, they're tenants on our land. It's like, why should they charge us more than production costs?
Yeah, we can ask them.
Yeah, that'd be worth knowing. And is battery storage included in the deal, or because that's a kind of a big plus if you have battery storage?
I think that's something we would end up discussing with them separately from this, because the battery storage is a new thing. So I would think we could get something out of that, or adjust this deal later, because I agree with that.
It's a huge difference in cost, about a factor 3 if you have battery storage. That's why.
And I just actually heard about the battery storage recently. So what I would expect there is when they
Let me interject something. Just for the discussion of this contract, it states that the delivery will be at the 230 kV rack at the Meade substation. It does not tell you where the power is coming from. It just says where the delivery is going to be at. So don't wish for things we can't command and we can't control. Whether it comes from battery storage, photovoltaic, or spot market, where they're actually taking and paying Skylar to buy the electricity below market value and then wheel it, okay?
The problem we're worried about right now for Boulder City is the cost per megawatt hour and whether or not we're going to get consistent deliveries for a 24-hour period. And that's the stuff I want to get into because we're bullshitting about, pardon my language, where it's coming from, and I'm worried about the contract. And that's what we're here tonight for. And we have till 6 o'clock to get this done. It's now 4 o'clock.
No, but the storage is what determines the
No,
consistency of the...
no. Storage is not our control. It's just like when Water and Power Los Angeles built a 250 megawatt solar farm. We built the receiving rack, and then at the very end, when the farm started to go in, they said, oh, we want to put 100 mega battery storage in there. We had the capacity at the rack at 230 kV to add extra positions. But that's not our bailiwick in this committee and in this contract. We don't worry about where they're generated and where they're getting it from. We'd have to be satisfied with the price and the delivery.
Whether the price is reasonable depends on their costs. And the costs are determined by whether they have storage or not. It's a factor 3 of difference in the cost of generation. It's absolutely crucial for solar. Anyway, agree to disagree.
No, when Cuopo started this project, because I was involved in it back 8-9 years ago when Ned was here working for the city, they were selling 50 meg to Glendale, California. Glendale, California has been waiting for that electricity for 9 years. It's going to be waiting for another 2 before they see it come across the lines as delivered power. The problem we got is, yes, every time technology changes, it becomes more favorable, but I guarantee you that in 20 years or 15 years, you're going to be buying that battery system again in its entirety. And then that costs you more money. And any company that's in the business of generating electricity for their profit, they're not going to put all the cards on the table and let a municipality see how they're doing it.
I'm just asking. They can say no. I'm just asking.
So, but I want to respond to a comment. So as part of our arrangement with SSEA, it's their job to ensure that we have 24-hour solid delivery, and they do that. And so
what I'm referring to is this contract that's in front of us. Mm-hmm. There's 1 hour missing on off-peak and 1 hour missing on peak load delivery. So for 22 hours of a 24-hour day, we get electricity from this company, but for 2 hours of a 24-hour period, we get 0.
Yeah, and Larry brought that up, so I've got that question already. So.
Well, if it's okay, if it's okay, Dennis, do you mind? I've got the sheet I gave you. I gave Dennis the sheet, and I think you can follow along on the contract if you don't mind. And maybe you guys can look at the contract back and see if you guys agree as I'm going through and give you some ideas whether to, if we need to email more information over to the city to try to change it. I guess part of the question is if this contract can even be modified. It's confusing because first off, you've got solar service agreement. Mm-hmm. So, and there's nothing in this contract that really says we're guaranteed even solar. So it just, as Greg pointed out, it doesn't guarantee where it's coming from. Mm-hmm. A lot of this stuff, the information is confusing. So I guess what I did is I put together just a one-page sheet. And on that one-page sheet, I went from the preamble recitals all the way to the product and just listed all the articles, because that's not done in this contract. Not all the contracts do, but when you have a reasonable amount of articles, it helps when you have one place to look instead of going all the way through the contract and figuring out what's what. So that's one aspect of it. The one thing that's very, very frustrating is they put so much information only in the definitions and nowhere else. So if I'm understanding, and this is where it would be very helpful to make sure that I'm not missing something, the meat for Boulder City or for this committee or for the power is in Article 4 in the power and sale of product. And to get the understanding of 4.1, you have to go through 6 to 8 definitions before you can get the facts. So do you want me to run through that right quick? Do we have time to run through that right quick?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I can at least try to do some, because you start off with delivery date. Well, you gotta go back to the definition, and delivery date is is January 1st, 2022. Then you go to the term. Well, the term, you have to find the effective date, which is the top of the contract, and then you have to go to delivery term to get even the term of the contract, and the term of the contract then I believe is 2052 is when the term is up. But everything is sort of vague in this contract. There's hardly any, well, the delivery date is clear, but some of the stuff you have to make sure that you've added your numbers right and everything, otherwise you're going. So there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily clear. Then the delivery term, so you go down to the next thing, and so you've got commencing on delivery date, so you have to find that. It will continue through the term. You've got to find that number. Service provider shall sell and deliver to customer at the delivery point. So now I got to find the delivery point. But before I put it, you have to find the delivery term because you have to finish the term before you can even find the term. So I got to first find the delivery date. Then I got to find what the term means. I have to find the delivery term to get that. I've got to then go to the delivery point, which is at Meade, as Greg pointed out, and that means that we need to make sure that Southern Nevada that Silver State is completely on board, and so the next part when we get to the transmission, that we understand, do we have transmission costs, or is there something we don't understand? I'll get to that in a minute. The contract price is only in the definitions, and I don't think I've hardly ever seen that. Because, if you're going to modify it, that's one thing, and you would have it in another area. But you wouldn't put it in definitions anyway. You'd have it in a place that you could modify it. Well, my understanding is it's for a 30-year period, we have $39.95, but it's pretty ridiculous to go to the definitions to find that. Then I have to go down, so we go service, delivered to the customers at the delivery point, and the customer shall receive and purchase from service at the contract price. So I got to go back to the definitions to find that. The product delivered pursuant to the terms of this service agreement. What are the terms of the service agreement? So it's a lowercase term. It's not the deal. And so the only thing I can figure out is it's 4.1 and 4.3. So I'll get to that in a minute. And it's still it's not clear what Boulder City is really getting or exactly how everything's been done. It's close, but it's not exactly there. So the product, and I think that would be, if we can't change the contract, the biggest thing I think we need to look at is the exhibit. So we got product, means during any hour during the delivery term, firm energy that the service provider is obligated to deliver to customer at the delivery point during such hour in an amount equal to the amount of energy set forth for such hour in Exhibit A. We're talking about energy. Exhibit A only has megawatts capacity. So to me, there's a major dysfunctional aspect of that. We don't have any idea how much energy we can get. Correct. Well, what they're doing is they're saying I'm assuming what it is, it's like a plant. We have a portion of the plant, theoretically, that we have 5 megawatts, and then what our energy we can get out of the 5 megawatts during the on-peak, off-peak hour is what we can buy. So theoretically, we would have 5 megawatts every hour, which is now shorted 2.
Right.
So of the on-peak and of the time frame in Exhibit A.
So this is not firm power. Is it just plant contingent?
No, there's no plant factor, there's no contingency, there's nothing. And it says firm energy. But again, I have, 3-4 pages of definitions, but for things like that would make sense to us aren't there. AC is, I'll brought up later, is talked about. AC
but
is nowhere.
At one point, you can divide by the capacity factor, which is in fact 30 and not 15 for a plant in Arizona. I can give you the numbers if you want. The Agua Caliente solar project in Arizona has a capacity factor of 30%, which is why I divided by 3 from 8, which gets you about 3 megawatts of continuous power, which gets you, about 30 million kilowatt hours a year. And that's where I got my 20% of our actual electricity usage. All those numbers may be wrong, but that's what I did in my head based on those numbers you're quoting. So.
Well, I appreciate that, George, but unfortunately there's nothing in this contract that you can use those numbers on. So that's the whole problem. I'm assuming, because it has to be 5 megawatts, because that's what they're telling us. Go ahead, Greg.
We were just talking about dates, and something just
triggered on me is commercial operation is supposed to be December 31st of 2023. That's the guaranteed date. But here it states that the delivery date means January 1st of 2022. How's that going to happen?
Well, there again, that's because that's one of the crux of the situation is that they don't have to deliver it from that solar plant.
Right.
And so what they're doing is, if I understand correctly, but then again, that's the whole problem with the contract. There's too many holes in it. If there'd be any problem, well, I won't say that, but anyway, there's too many loopholes. There's not enough certainty. There's a lot of intented, and you shouldn't have an intention in the contract. You should have certainty. So you guys are all right, and that's what I'm getting at is we don't know what's going on. So the way I read it, because I was very confusing, is that we're supposed to have the delivery date on the 22nd. The January 1st of 22. If the plant is not built by December 31st of 23, then the contract is in default. So they're using that as a guarantee date. I don't think it comes in place anywhere else besides the commercial. That one, I think it's section 3. That's the only place it's used, except for as being a default. So that's another thing that's confusing, is trying to understand exactly what we're getting with this. The cost that you were referring to earlier, I'm assuming that, I'm not even sure if that was a negotiated cost or if that's just the cost that they told us. And unfortunately, George, a lot of times when you're out in the market price, you can sometimes negotiate, but it's not like, well, you put us at this much, we wanted this. Like, if you do negotiate, they're gonna say, we'll sell it to you at this, and sometimes you can negotiate, and other times, like, that's our number, there's nothing else to work with. So that's one thing we need to figure out. But if it has to be signed by the 14th, most likely that's not going to be any negotiation. It's a done deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious about whether we're getting our money's worth. After all, we're the landlord, it's our land, but I agree the deadlines and things, and certainly more certain than Hoover Dam, and we have to pay them whether or not they generate electricity, so this is certainly a better deal than that one.
Well, and it certainly is, when you compare it to the market purchases.
Yeah, it's a better deal than Markets, but not a better deal than Hoover, to make sure we understand.
Right,
This is
that's
not
correct.
better than Hoover.
That's not better than Hoover. That is correct.
This is better than Hoover. This is not better.
Hoover's better.
Well, my understanding is Hoover, we have to pay them whether or not they provide the electricity, whereas these guys were presumably buying electricity, not capacity, or I don't know. It says cents per megawatt hour.
Well, see, that's what we're trying to find out. I don't know if we're buying 5 megawatts once during the period, or we're buying 5 megawatts when we want it, or if we're obligated. See, that's what we don't know.
And that's the clarification we need.
Yeah, so that's a major clarification. So that's the major one, and I think we need at least another exhibit minimum. But if we were to clean this up, these are some of the things that would be nice to be able to do. Because even if you could take these 6. If we go from delivery date through product and incorporate that into 4.1, it would make 4.1 a whole lot easier to read.
I agree.
And then off-peak and on-peak, though, that's what you've got to figure out for your product.
Yep.
And then we've got to figure out, can we change that? I believe it would be 2,200 hours to 6 o'clock, and then 6 o'clock to 2,200 hours is what that would be for on-peak, off-peak, and on-peak. So you'd make sure, so like I said, the one aspect in 4.1 is, so first off, the product is not clear at all, what we have. We're being charged for megawatt hours, and we're told we're getting megawatts, so it's very unclear. Delivery pursuant to the terms of this service agreement, I will repeat that again. I'm not sure what other terms there are besides 4.1 and 4.3. So if they're saying the terms is 4.3, then that's, I guess it's still, then it'd almost be nice to say as deemed in 4.3. So I'm not looking somewhere else in the contract to understand what's going on. Then the customer will not use the product itself, but shall resell such product, which product is misspelled, because that's from the contract. I didn't misspell it, that was from the contract, to customers' ratepayers. And that seems a little strange because it's first off, I don't understand why that would be in that contract. That's really it isn't between the seller and unless you're saying you won't resell it for a higher price, that's not what that says. Because it almost would say that the city can't use it for their own facilities. So just a clarification would be helpful.
Yep.
And then the transmission, the 4.3 is a lot better, but if I'm understanding, well, first off, it says the customer should generate e-tags. So for those that, it's electronic tag, that's how we're trying to figure out, and again, so e-tag, they have 3 to some pages of definitions, and e-tags isn't in the definition, and hardly anybody understands what an e-tag is. So why isn't that in the definitions when they got everything else defined? But basically, it's an electronic tag that's where you're trying to actually figure out where the electrons are coming from.
Right.
But so they're going to have. So I don't understand why Boulder City would do it. Boulder City can't do it.
Boulder City won't do that. We ran this language past SNWA because
That's good. But that, unfortunately, the scheduling agent is only listed in this, and it's listed in this section and only once. In most contracts, the scheduling agent's listed in a couple places of what their duties are. It makes it clear who does what. So that's another thing that's confusing. And it says that we have to pay for it, so I think it's been brought up here, is that since it's being delivered to the 230 kV, we're not positive, because the Hoover is delivered to the 69 kV. And so if we have to, there's a small chance we'd have to pay a wheeling charge between the 230 and the 69 kV. And so we need to know if Southern Nevada Water, so the Silver State, if that's part of what we have in reserves, or is that something they have to cover?
Right.
Well, we do have partial ownership in the 150 megawatt, the 125 megawatt transformer, and then we have 20 megawatts of rights in the western 230 kV transformer. So we do have some tied to the 230 kV bus down there.
Yeah, if these are included in what we already have reserved, then we're good.
Should be all right, but that's a good point. Yeah, it
Yep.
should be right.
And we're gonna verify that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so those are some of the, I think those are most of it, but it's, I guess, we do want to make sure that Silver State has looked at this to make sure that it isn't, because it's not clear, but the exhibit is the major thing that I would assume we'd probably want an exhibit B that would show us the energy.
Yep.
Would be helpful.
Yep, I agree.
So, okay, well, thank you.
So, no, I appreciate that. And again, if you guys think of any other questions, please just email me.
I'm a bit puzzled why the delivery is 0 in April when typically these solar plants overproduce relative to energy that's needed. I'd have thought they'd want to sell us energy in April, but. March and April is when Hoover releases its water for the water purposes. And so Hoover produces, I think, almost a larger portion of energy during those 2 months. And if we were to buy it, we wouldn't be able to use all of our Hoover. So it was our side of the contract, I'm assuming, I'm hoping that did that.
All right, that's because that's basically when California, Arizona start irrigating.
Correct.
Yep.
So
I do have one question, and this might be too early. When I was one of the individuals instrumental in hooking up Copper Mountain Solar 3 into Marketplace Switching Station, we had written in the contract that we had rights to come into their relay house and inspect our house meter. So we could see delivered power coming out of the solar farm. And then we had another meter that they were allowed to come in and look at Marketplace to verify the line losses of transmission across the desert. Because this is coming in at 230 kV and going to be delivered at 230 kV into Meade Sub, what does Boulder City have for our meter guy to check and make sure the meters are proper calibration? Because if they're billing us, our meter charges or the billables, they can have an error factor of 5%, 2%, whatever they want to tweak the meter to, and we're paying extra money for power coming through. You can't shut it off once it's being delivered. You can't throttle it back. There's no resistor in the line other than a tap changing transformer, which I know some people know what those are. But what I'm saying is where's our protection to guarantee that we're not getting taken advantage of on this system that we're getting ready to sign a contract to and buy into?
Probably relying on WAPA, but we ought to make sure.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good
some
point.
accountability there. That's a good idea.
Yep.
no, it's good.
So where is this at? Where does this contract Does the city attorney's office review this finally at the end?
No, they have reviewed it once.
They've reviewed it
Yeah.
once, and many changes by them or
Not
not?
really.
Okay.
So,
I mean, they'll probably finalize it after, okay.
Well, it's confusing right now because the contract, currently, the one we have, has been signed by the town site. So I'm assuming we're waiting for it be signed by the council, would that be, or the mayor? Is that the way it would be done?
I believe so, yeah.
So I think that's the confusion we're having is that it would be at a council meeting, I'm assuming, to be declared, which by July 14th, would that be the first council meeting in July, which be, is that
Yeah,
your
and
next meeting?
And it doesn't have to be that date. It can be the following date.
Okay. Yeah, we just need to make sure, because some of these things you can have the effective date be after the signature, but it's not
Right.
preferred.
Okay.
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, because I think the biggest thing is so the future is to condense it and make sure that we understand what the meat of it is.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Okay, anything else before we close that down? Okay, thank you very much. So now we shall go to the ongoing capital improvement projects update.
Correct. And if you'll bear me a little bit, I think we're making decent time. I was just going to run through kind of an update on where some of the major projects are. And then if you had questions on the other projects versus going through every one. Although I could go through every one, but.
So I'm seeing that, I'm looking at different size piece. Are we dealing with the capital funding or the future funding? Which one are we looking at now?
What was it on the agenda?
Because you gave us a 8.5 by 11 with
Yeah, I
yellow
blew mine up
markings.
so I can see it.
Okay, okay, just making sure I'm,
And I have my notes on here, so I don't forget what the update actually is.
okay, no, fine, okay, so you're gonna go over the major ones and then I guess, does anybody have any concerns with that? Okay, thank you.
What was your question again? What was-
Whether, if he just goes over the major, as long as we can ask questions on other ones that we might have.
Okay.
And I'll get more than just the major ones, but starting on the feeder, so about 4 or 5 items down, feeder 63 to substation 3 tie. That project's about 30% complete. The feeder 53 replacement, that's about 50% complete. And you'll see where it says roll or close, that just means the project's not done by the fiscal year, so that budget rolls into the next year so that it, because it's going to be completed in FY '21 or beyond that. The 69 kV transmission loop, which is the one of the larger projects. If you drive down on the Nevada Way side, on the lake side, you'll see they've taken it across the freeway. They've strung most of the conductor. They're basically finishing up the end poles at each substation. I would expect that to be finished middle of July, that entire project. So that's been one of the bigger projects.
Now, so does the 4 million, does that include everything?
That includes everything.
Because I guess there was mention of a 12 kV underline. So you've got the
the 12, that's included. So yeah, you'll see that if you drive by, you'll see the 12 kV underbuild is on the poles as well.
But that's part of the 4 million. That's not additional charge.
Correct.
And so in July, it'll be 100. If it's complete, it'll be 100% done, or do we have any little cleanup work?
No, it'll be 100% done.
Okay, so it will.
Middle of July.
It will roll over into the fiscal year, but it should be done pretty close to so it's not okay.
And if you remember, this one was delayed with the discussions on the neighborhood, as well as we had recently had pole delays. Otherwise, it would be done a couple of months ago, probably. Some of the poles were delayed. Yeah, they just got here, so that's why PAR actually had to pull off the job, waiting for those last few poles. So, yep. So.
Question on Marvis, does that what can be underbuilt? Does it go all the way from sub 6 back to the tap, or?
No, it'll terminate at sub 3.
Sub 3, okay.
Yeah, it'll be a tie between 6 and 3.
All right, that's right.
And we'll actually have two, 65 and 63. We'll both
Okay.
a tie between.
So two underbills, huh?
Yeah, well, one's almost there.
All right.
That's-
Oh, yeah, you're right.
He
Okay.
touched on earlier, the 63 is already almost there. The
Okay.
65 is the new overhead conductor. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
The BC tap.
Greg, did you have a comment on that?
Well, they didn't want to muddy the water, but who's doing the work inside the stations? Is that part of the 69 kV build, or is that going to be another contract let out for new disconnects, additional equipment? Relay protection, who's going to protect the line? What kind of relays you're going to use? Power flow, all that stuff. Where is that?
I'm going to stare at Marvis.
Yeah, that's ESS.
ESS.
Yes.
So the guys that are doing the
Right,
work
the
on
other stuff, the
substation.
water and sanitation. So the problem I'm having with it is there background relay protection for electrical circuits?
Mr. Greg, ESS is the one that did our above grade and everything for the tap. So they're doing our relay settings and everything as well. So
Okay,
they're-
okay.
They're versed in that, yes, sir.
Except for when it goes back to the Boulder City tap, and then it becomes part of WAPA. Because they're gonna have to protect their 230 high side circuit from that 69 kV loop that's getting put in.
Correct. It is a collaboration between WAPA's relay techs and what ESS is proposing, and then they balance it off each other, and WAPA has the final say on the settings, absolutely.
And where is that CIP project in this sheet?
I don't know where that is right now.
I'm pretty sure that was part of the
It is
overhead work.
Is it ongoing, or is it still to be done?
It's almost finished. So, but yeah, right now it's ongoing, but it's pretty close.
Are you talking about the 4 kV overhead line? Is what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the BC tap, oh, not that one. I'm trying to find it in here. The BC tap transformer breaker. But it's the overhead.
The tap to the substation 6.
No, stop, everybody stop.
Well, I'm trying to
I
find
used to do this stuff for a living, okay? You're missing a component, all right? Anytime you introduce another line into a transformer from transmission to subtransmission, the company that is the supplying an entity for power is gonna wanna see your relay settings and how your power flow is gonna work and what you're gonna do to protect that transformer on the 230 side circuit breaker.
Right, and that's the work that ESS has been doing with WAPA.
Correct, and so
WAPA,
that's why WAPA and the company that's working with them put an $80,000 field change in for the Boulder City tap project because they forgot the relays. Okay, I'm trying to prevent that problem from happening on the 69 kV side.
Well, that wasn't actually true. WAPA messed that up, if you want to know the truth, because we had invited them and encouraged them to do what they were supposed to do, and they drug their feet. And didn't do
Trust
what
me,
they
I've
did.
dealt with them for decades.
So it wasn't ESS, it wasn't the city of Boulder, it was WAPA.
But we're on the hook for the money.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I'm saying is in order to prevent this future problem from occurring on the Boulder City tap to the Buchanan line, we need to get them on board now because that's going to change the relay settings when we change the gauge of the conductor at 69 kV from the Boulder City tap to the Buchanan circuit. And then you have the possibility, and I don't know the switching orders, and that's where you come in at 69. Are we doing a P&S or are we doing a separated parallel from the Boulder City tap to the Buchanan circuit?
It's going to be a separate parallel.
Yeah.
And WAPA is already on board with that because we have already advised them we did not want to run into what we ran into with the BC tap. So they've already been integrated with QES, who is the engineering firm that we're using, and they're already on board with it. So.
And has QES bought into fiber optic OPGW cable coming from the Boulder City tap all the way to the Buchanan tie, the T?
and then allowed extra fiber, dark fiber, and OPGW cable to allow us to terminate at those points. So when we go to do our protective scheme and the remote control of our stations, we can tap onto that dark fiber and go down back towards the WAPA station and go down to the stations down Hemingway Valley and pick it all up.
That's a yes and a no. The yes is that fiber has been included in the 69 kV loop and the reconductor from the tap to Buchanan. However, once we hit Buchanan, that's a dual share line between NV Energy and Boulder City. So we're going to have to enter into an agreement with them to have the fiber added there.
I think what we need to do is, if we add the fiber back down from Buchanan to 5 and then allow Meade sub to tie into it, they should share some of the cost. And then if we put a termination point at that T-tap, basically, then we can pull it and go anywhere we want to go. Because we could undersling that OPGW cable on our static ground wire on the bottom of the pole, because that's owned by Boulder City 100%. And we could run that fiber down in that lower spot, and that belongs to us. That's our neutral, basically, going through town/ground. We could pick that up and go to any one of our stations and tap onto any pole that terminates in or close to a station.
Well, that would be on the distribution line, but the transmission is a joint share line between, again, NV Energy and Boulder City. And so if we go on the natural static, we would have to get them involved.
And so we'd
that would be the plan.
Yeah, we'd give them the kiss like they gave us. We'll charge $1 million for idle time on the OPGW.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, let's hop down to, let's go down to E1703. I'm sorry, UW 171, just to kind of, I think you can see the rest of electrical, just because I'm trying to watch our time here and I want to spend a little more time on the capital plan than on the ongoing projects. We recently, and I'm trying to find, on the copper service replacement, we combined a couple of projects that weren't going to be done, so that we could finish the water services that need to be replaced up in Coronado Estates. So they'll all be done with that modification. And then I'll talk more about the copper service replacement program when we get into the capital plan. We still do need to do a PRV on the El Dorado line in order to actually be able to utilize that pipeline that Greg was mentioning. And so that design will start shortly. We've been having a company just take a quick look at what that PRV needs to look at, what would be the appropriate settings, and there potentially may need to be more than one. So,
so you get 2 line items on there, and the way I'm reading it, you've got almost basically $800,000 that will roll over into 2021 for El Dorado Valley just alone for the line. So, and is that our money, or is there any money left from the contractor, from the solar plant?
So
I should say, is that city's money?
Well, it's all the city's money once they gave it to us. The $2 million, the amount provided by the solar leasee was $2 million. So anything over $2 million would have been the city's, but anything that's rolled that we're not going to use will just go back into the fund balance, or could be used to be used for other projects.
So it looks like we were already over the $2 million anyway. If I'm looking at previous,
yes, the
extended and the revised budget, but I guess we got to figure out it's a little confusing. I guess I'll leave it at the end of this discussion. I think it might help Fred's comment, and I think we want to go here, or start here, and then go into the capital improvement is sort of the funds that combine, because that's the thing that's really confusing for me, is when we end this year and go into next year and what funds are available to do that. So I'll let you finish that, so I won't interrupt thought any more than I already have, but if we can do that before we go to the next, I'd appreciate it.
With regards to the BC Parkway, and that's really, you'll see water RTC, there's also a wastewater RTC. It's titled as E1703 as a project number. Those are, as you can imagine, are virtually complete. The project itself is 99.9% complete, except for a little bit of landscaping out there. And so that money shown there is what that is for the BC Parkway project. Let's see, what else do we got? And you'll see the two projects that we closed that were the AC pipe replacement and the large meter valve backflow replacement. Those were never really defined in the previous CIP, so those are the monies we took and used for the copper service to add to the copper service replacement.
Okay, so make sure I'm understanding. In the future, we might want to look at available budget, and maybe it's just my misunderstanding or I'm being too complicated. So the AC pipe, we had $463,300 left after we're saying it's closed.
Right.
And so that's available for this year to go into another project.
Correct. And so that's
Okay, where I'm getting a shaking of my head in the back behind you.
Yes.
Sorry.
She's shaking her head.
Those are the two that we went to council.
Yes.
We combined,
We combine them to the copper service replacement, right?
so on the next, what had happened is on here. So on the next one, when you look at the end of this month, you'll see the W2006.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have numbers on ours, so we can't follow
Oh,
it
I'm
that way.
sorry. Okay, so the copper service replacement, that will actually have a new total available that will roll of 673,403 because you're going to combine the two numbers above it. And that was,
Okay, because I think, I'll just bring it up really quickly, because right now, when you say available, it makes sense for the year, but to roll over, that money no longer is, it's the budgeted, you budgeted for that, but we don't necessarily have the money for that. So that's one thing, I guess, once we're done talking, I'll make sure I'm understanding, and maybe I'm not explaining myself well, but that's the way I've understand the finances. So let me get into that after we finish what the projects are, because
I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly what you're saying.
Basically talking about cash compared to what was budgeted. So we budgeted for,
Rolling that over.
but it depends on what it was used, make sure it wasn't used for. So theoretically, that money wasn't used, and so the money wouldn't be needed.
But it's going into the other fund.
This one is, yes.
Yeah.
But if we didn't have that information, I wouldn't know that. It would just look like that was cash that was going to be available into the next year.
Yeah, but
the way I'm looking at it. That's why I
but
wanna
just
make
so
sure.
you know, when we do those types of transactions, they go to council for the budget
Yeah,
amendments.
I mean, you have to roll,
So-
that roll is very well documented, right?
Right, the rolls
If
are
it isn't-
documented.
If it doesn't get used, then it's just lost money.
Well, it just goes to the fund
Go
balance.
back to the fund balance, right?
But we're talking about a close that got rolled.
Correct, yeah.
Well, then it's not a close. The money's been reallocated to
It's
a project.
for the
that's-
project, it's a close for the project.
But the money then would go back into the general water fund. And what we're saying is we've reallocated it to copper water line lateral
Correct.
replacements.
Correct, I see that.
But we should also take into account that in the next project that's been let for copper water line replacements, also is in dire need of fire hydrant and main valve replacements. So that money could also be allocated for that project, because on the project document that I saw this, I'm talking about, they're digging up every single lateral in a neighborhood. But they're not gonna touch the main 6 or 8 inch valves, or 4-inch valves, or the fire hydrants. So here we've cut the street up, we've dug all the holes in it as a city to do a copper water line replacement. but we haven't touched the fire hydrants that are supposed to protect the property or the main isolation valves in the street that won't work when they need to shut it off because they've broken off a angle stop.
That's fine, we can just look at that, but if it's
Right.
there, that could be reallocated again,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Go ahead, Dennis, sorry.
You'll see, and I'm going to hop down to wastewater real quick. We've had a little bit of delay on getting some feedback from some vendors on cleaning up that headworks a little bit. We still anticipate a solution that's not going to take near the $400,000. And we're just waiting for information back from the consultant who's working with the specific vendor on the auger and the grinder and the channel modifications. Landfill expansion, just a little update on that project. We've completed the permit modifications. We have to do some monitoring, methane monitoring that's coming up in July. The landfill expansion phasing plan, we just kicked that project off to start that new phasing plan. And to give you an idea of what we're doing with that is the current plan, if you go out there, anticipated going up another 20 feet. And if you go out there right now, that just didn't set well with me of going up another feet when we have 100 acres and we can be a little more efficient with how we lay out the cells in the future and not have to go up that additional 20 feet. The reason that's problematic is because we already have an issue now with when they lay the trash out. You know, it takes time to get the cover on, and grocery bag, it's really windy up there, and another 20 feet is not going to help. We sat down with the consultant who's helping us with that, and they've come up with a conceptual plan that we need to, get it to a real plan that we all believe will work with stopping at the elevation we're at right now, and that would be the top of the landfill when it's complete.
And so you more efficiently use it, but we won't drastically reduce the lifespan of the...
We won't at all.
Okay, great.
So,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's been something we've been working towards and finally kind of came to an agreement with the landfill operator on how that would work and what that would look like. And so now we have to go out now and survey it and do some topo, and then they can do the conceptual plan. That will eventually lead to also the perimeter fencing and the road design. So they all kind of go in order.
Take advantage of the existing valleys that are out there, dig them out deeper.
Yeah, because they can go down.
That's what I was thinking, sure.
And so, that's what we're looking at. Go down more, and then it's just a matter of placing areas where you can have runoff from storms that don't impact the landfill. And so that's a little bit of the phasing comes in on how you utilize that property.
It's a good idea.
So, so that's kind of a, certainly you can ask me about any of these other ones, or you can ask Marvis while he's here. And then we'll go into the longer plan next.
So I guess you'll go, I think one of the big ones is the 4 kV. Where do we stand at that? Because are you going to go into that more detail on this coming year?
I can give you a little bit of update. Sorry, I should have not skipped that one. Right now, we have approximately 40% done. And if you look at next year's FY21 budget, there's an additional 1.2 million in there for the 4K overhead work.
Right. And where did we say the 900 900,000 that Par Electric, because that's where I'm still confused, is that my understanding was that came out of the one of these 4K.
It came out
budgets.
of last budget's 1.2.
Okay.
So this FY 20 1.2. So if you remember early on, I think it was late summer, we went out for bid on that project and negotiated a $900,000 scope of work for them to do that work.
But is that so right now you're showing 2.3 is what the total approved budget was for the 4 kV. Does that include the 900,000?
Yes, and it includes the previous work.
Okay, but so is Par Electric doing just the 4K? I thought they were doing other things other than the 4, I mean, on top of the 4K.
Oh, yeah, well, they did the 69 kV loop.
No, I understand, but I mean, with that 900,000 though, we took it from the 4K, so are we missing money for the 4K, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Are we short?
No, that was part of the project.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I'll lead in really quick. I'll try to keep it quick. If not, we'll put it into another meeting, and if anybody else has any questions, but I think what we're confused on, and what I've heard Fred bring up a lot, was we've gone from like 21 million to 20 million of budgeted money, mostly I believe from 2015 and on. And this is so that's where I was confusing with the available budget, and I was probably mixing apples and oranges in the way I was saying too, and I apologize for that, but that's what I'm trying to get a better understanding is how I say it and how I can track it. I think part of what I'm looking at is what I saw last year, and I'm wondering what's going to happen this year. So let me start with what I believe will happen in this year for the electrical portion. So if I'm understanding correctly, we have a budget of $9.1 million for capital improvement in 2021, and that's part of 2021's budget that was approved. Is that correct? Okay. Now then, if I'm looking at this correctly, we have at least 6.4 million that would be saying is available, which I believe is being rolled over in the electric, and you also have 3.5. Okay, that was the yearly expended. So you have 3.8 that's encumbered. So it depends on what is paid out before the end of the year and what is paid out next year. Now what happens? So right now, let's just say that, well, you round it up, it looks like you actually have $10 million between what is encumbrance and what is available and what would be rolled over. So you have about $19 million going forward into next year's budget. Last year, when they had that same situation, they did not bring any money over with it. They didn't even show that funds would come out of the current funds that it was discussed. They'd had the 25 million. So I would hope that either there's a revised budget or something to show me that I've got 9 million in this budget and I have 10 million from other funds that are funding this carryover revenue, this carryover capital. Does that make sense? And I think part of what Fred is trying to figure out, this is where we're getting confused between what's budgeted money and what's cash. So what was left over from because we've had between 5 million and 7 million budgeted for each year from 2015 on, I believe. So we've spent somewhere between 3 and 5. I don't even know if we've made it up to 5 in the last 3 years. So it looks like we have this money that's rolled over, but the only money that's rolled, it's not the budgeted money that's rolled over, it's the money that wasn't spent that's rolled over. That's now part of that 25 million, if I'm understanding correctly. So in what he brought up as the manager's report, where you have $45 million that's in the utility fund. So it's one of the last pages on
right.
Then you have so much restricted, so much reserved, and 25 point some million dollars that's available for all the utilities. And so out of that, you've got money available for capital for water, power, and waste and landfill.
Right.
So out of that 25 million, I'm assuming we need at least 10 million of that to cover what's being rolled over. And that's what I guess I'm trying to, so that's for the electrical. Then we've got other ones that we're rolling over now. But in the past, the city manager's report doesn't show all the, because there is a line that says funds coming, amount transferred from funds. And so theoretically, this year, in July or August, you would show 10 million coming out of the electrical funds. Am I missing something? Because you don't seem to agree to me.
I don't think the money ever leaves the fund. As if maybe I'm not understanding
You have
exactly what you're saying.
okay, let's just go for an ease of, let's just say we're doing the capital. Okay, let's just make it easy. So we've got a revenue of $9 million and we have capital of $9 million. So this budget, you're showing that we have a budget of revenue of 9 and we're budgeting for 9 and we're gonna go to 0. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do in 2021. Now we've rolled over our $10 million from the past capital that it looks like we're actually gonna get finished this time, which we haven't finished for 5 years.
We're trying.
And so where's that $10 million coming from? It's not in 21 budget, it's from past budgets.
So I think the easiest place to see that, and now I'm going to get away from the city manager's report for a second, is when we have the workshop with the rate consultant, that financial plan shows all of that. So, it's showing the projects that are ongoing. It's showing the 10-year cash flow with capital, all the operating, the revenue side, and then it'll show those fund balances every year for the next 5 years.
Okay, are we going to show any historical years in that?
I think they only showed 19 or 20. I'd have to go back and I think they just showed 20. I don't know if they show historical.
19 would be helpful because future's not going to help us much. And I guess if you show
future is what determines the rates. So.
But what we're trying to do is sort of, I'm trying to make sure I understand correctly, and Fred's been bringing this up most every meeting. And so what I'm trying to get at is there's a confusion between budgeted capital and what money is left over that gets rolled over. So if a project wasn't done, that money is not necessarily available for other projects. And so I think that's the confusion part.
It's available for other projects.
If it flows through into the year revenue, it does. If it doesn't flow through the end of the revenue, it doesn't. So I'm not explaining myself properly. I apologize, but it's not.
But if you're rolling it over, that's going to go to a project or a budget project that's already existing. It's not for anything new. It's for an existing project.
Well, or it could. It could.
If it doesn't
it's
get
never
used,
been. It's never been shown that way in the past.
Right.
So we have never seen that in this committee.
I think you're probably got to look at a different spot because it's got to be there.
No, it has not. They have never shown the money rolling over to do the capital. They've never shown that here.
I don't. No, so you're. That's wrong. It's got to be shown.
Show me. They can't, show me.
I'm
sorry if I'm getting aggravated.
No,
and that's why I say that.
How in the world would they not be able to publicly not do that? I've been involved in these budgets, and you know where that money is. I see it all the time.
You do? I've never.
But welcome to the world of Boulder City. That's why we got formed.
Well, there's laws that govern that, and it has to be there. They could probably show you exactly where that is.
So, and that's why the financial plan shows all the cash flow. It shows all the operating with professional maintenance, all those expenses. It shows the fund balances projected coming out, and that's what we will use that's what they will use to make recommendations relating to the rates.
But we don't show the history. The history has not been brought forward that way. And there is a confusion between budget and cash. And it was even brought to me, well, it's budget, you don't understand. Well, show me what's budget, show me so I can understand. So, because basically what happens is it's budgeted this year, and when it rolls over, it would be cash, and it would be available for that product. And I'm trying to understand that. So, okay, we don't have time to get into it today, but this is a discussion I've been trying to understand. And like I said, Fred, this is what Fred's talking about. He's talking about, he's saying there's $20 million out there, and there's not. I understand that too. There is some money, and it would just see if we can clarify what is getting rolled over in the projects. But I have never seen, and that's been part of the reason we've asked for this document, because this document in the past has not shown us carrying everything over. It hasn't.
Right.
And that's what's been confusing
And that's why we've
us.
added this FY '21 status on what we think is going to roll.
Okay. And it's helpful. I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that cash is something we have available, and not so when it's closed or it's still rolling. If it's closed, then that would no longer needed for that project. Right.
Then it just sits in the fund balance.
Right. But
it's available for.
But if it's rolled over, if it is for a project, then it shouldn't be in the available category. It should be in an encumbered aspect for that project.
It would be. So it could be rolled over, but it could be finished in 2 months.
I think one of the
And there could
staff
still
members is trying to speak over there.
There could still be $100,000 left that would stay in the fund balance when it closed.
Okay.
Why don't we give her a shot here? I think she wants
Yeah,
to.
she's a finance person.
The encumbered amount is if there's a PO out for it. So encumbered and available, those two combined of what's not spent on them isn't actually left to the bank for that project.
As of May 31st.
Correct.
You can't roll it over unless there's a PO or something that says what is designated for it, right?
No, the available balance
Right.
rolls over and the encumbrance rolls over.
Correct, but-
So both of those numbers are going to roll over to the next year.
Right.
Well, I think maybe we can just do it then can we somehow see how we're rolling the year over? So in a meeting or two, we see. So if you're saying that the data's there, then we'll see it roll over.
It's got to be there.
We'll-
But what, Boulder City secretly hides money? I think it's full of crap.
No, it stays, it's in the fund balance.
Well, of course it is.
But I think what happens is all we've seen is the upper level of the money. We haven't been shown. In the future, there's a little bit more shown, but it doesn't show us the carryover amount. So what we've been able to see for it doesn't break it down into the lower levels that show us this. It shows you the overall capital. It doesn't show you the lower level. So we don't know what that means. And it doesn't even, I don't think it shows you, I'm not even sure that the budget that they've approved shows you what was not spent of the capital. It's sort of rolled into something. So if I'm wrong, please show me. Show me where the capital in each project is.
I would suspect that the documentation's there. Those details they're probably not there. I'm sure they're not in what the city council sees for what they're approving as a budget item. But if they dig, it should be there.
Well, it'd be nice, I guess, in the next couple of meetings would be helpful.
Larry, hang on a second. We've got 2 retired CPAs, been looking at the books for 4 years. We can't find it. Okay, so what we're trying to do is shed light on it. Okay, your encumbrances are stuff that's owed to contractors and vendors that have to submit POs for the project. Now, someplace in this doggone world, there has to be a shut-off date. I can't submit a bill a year later to a project I've worked on. There has to be a shut-off date. Then the encumbrance rolls into cash. The cash goes back into the electric fund, the water fund, the sewer fund, or the trash fund. It does not go rolling into the general fund or an enterprise fund. And that's the problem we're having, and that's why this committee was formed. Because there's a lot of people watching what goes on in these meetings, and they're asking the same questions we're asking, and we still haven't gotten a good answer. So if you have an encumbrance, you have a deadline of six months after the project's done, or you get the bills cleaned up to submit the final bill. Once you submit the final bill, if it's after 6 months, a year later, sayonara, take me to court. But this is the problem I'm having, and this is what we're trying to explain. We've got projects that are rolled, okay, and then the available budget at the end of this fiscal year is $6.5 million. Where does it go? Does it go back into the individual funds? No, it goes back into the electric fund. So by the next fiscal year starting, we should see an infusion of that amount of money that's not encumbered from these projects. Well, it doesn't. It starts out at zero and we start over again. Where does it go? It's encumbered.
What's the city's answer to that then?
She's new.
What?
I said you're new.
I think that if you want want that answer, that should come from the finance director.
Correct.
But the information I gave you on this sheet says if a project is going to roll to the next year, when you see the monthly report next year, you'll see where it says on here revised budget for the beginning of this year. The revised budget for the beginning of next year, that's where it's gonna show that money rolling forward. So I'd be more than happy to show you after the end of the year, the beginning, and it'll show the money coming over from this year that was not spent, the encumbered and the available. And then if there's any money new for 21, that will be added to the budget at that time.
Okay, yeah, the only thing is the revised budget will show you what is budgeted, but the past, it hasn't shown you what's covering that budget. That's what I'm just trying to make sure I understand, because if I hear you right, you're gonna show, so in this column, total approved budget or revised budget, is it gonna be in the revised budget or the total approved budget?
The original budget, approved budget, is the budget approved for the entire project.
Gotcha.
So what I've done is I've gone through and looked at every time money was approved at council for that budget, and that's where those numbers came from.
But, so for next year, sorry.
And then any previously expended is anything that was spent prior to 20 on that. And then the revised budget is the total approved budget minus what was spent previously. And that's the total revised budget that we started with in 20, which would include anything that rolled over. Then the year-to-date expended, what's been spent in 20, anything encumbered under a PO, and so it subtracts out across that line, and that is the available budget at the end. So that number is, when I say roll next to it, that number that's left is what we're gonna roll to the next year. So it can still, with the encumbrance also, those two numbers will roll so that the project continues. And if there's additional money budgeted in 21, then that money in 21 will be in the total project budget will be increased by that number, and the amount available will be increased by that number, any new money. So on this sheet, if you add them across, it shows the original, what's been spent in prior years, what we started 20 with, what was spent in 20, what's under POs, and what's left. And then if it says roll, if it says closed, that means that that project's done. We didn't use that money, and that project will be closed. And that money has never left the utility fund. We don't transfer to a different CIP fund in the utility.
And that goes to the.
It stays in each.
It just stays as
It stays in the fund balance.
as a fund balance that could be used from somewhere else, correct?
Right. Or in the case of the two projects, we amended the budget to apply to the
But
other
you just
projects.
reallocated that. that's all.
Reallocated.
This year did not show that, so next year hopefully will. Then that's,
You're gonna be in trouble for that, for her not being on microphone.
Oh, oops, thank you.
You might wanna review that. I'm serious.
You want to try to say that again?
I wanna review that, so it wasn't on it.
Well,
Okay.
It was when you went over the sheet.
Okay, so on the sheet, the original budget fiscal year shows the year that the project started. The total approved budget is every time that there was a council action that added money to that project. That's where that total approved budget is, the total of all those actions. Previously expended is actual funds that were expended prior to 20. The revised budget for fiscal year 20 would be the total approved budget minus previously expended is a revised budget that went into 20. Year-to-date expended is anything that was paid for as of 5/31. Encumbrances is any POs that are open. So if you subtract the revised budget minus what we've spent, the year-to-date expended, minus the POs, that's the available budget. And that, if it says roll next to it, that is what's going to, that and the encumbrances will roll into 21.
Okay, so and that, I think if it helps, if you're familiar with the layout of the city manager's report, I believe is what it's called, when you have the revenue, there's a transfer in, and usually that's for the land sales or the lease that is in the revenue portion, and then there's a fund transfer in. Last year, this current year, 2020, or 1920, to do the fiscal year, that was never corrected to show this $13 million that funds were coming from the available the available funds to compensate for this extra budget that was not budgeted in 2020.
And as I said earlier, I would leave that up to finance to address. I'm not going to
And that's fine.
address that. I'm looking at the open CIP, and I've tracked every project from beginning, and that's what I'm putting on this report.
Okay,
So
and I
you
think
guys
so.
can-
So yours will have, similar to what it is now, we'll have a piece of the puzzle. I don't think we'll have the full puzzle, unfortunately, so you're correct. I believe we have to go to finance to get that full puzzle, and maybe that's what I've been trying to say. I've been trying to see the full puzzle, and I have not seen that to this date. And like I said, I'm trying to answer Fred's question, because it hasn't, but I know we have to get moving on. So, like I said, and that's what I was trying to get to try to move on, is that what can we do in a couple meetings to try to clarify that? I guess I'm assuming it'd be July or possibly August before things are moving forward, that we'd be able to see something a little cleaner.
Certainly will take some time in the year.
No, it'll actually, we'll be able, in the report, the end of June, will actually be in the July. So the first month, the July report, will be in August. And that's
Okay,
where you'll
so that's-
really be able to
See
see
it.
the first month of the fiscal year.
Okay, we're supposed to have okay, I guess a little bit into the next agenda, but we're supposed to be having, our next meeting, we're looking at somewhere in July. And so with this capital, would we just be finishing this one, or would we have would we have sort of what we talked about in July meeting, that we could have some of that information?
In
Or
the
do you-
July meeting, you'll know exactly what rolled,
Okay,
because it'll be as of June 30.
Right.
okay, that would be helpful, so that we're getting to a starting point where I can understand better, so, okay. So we need to move forward, but does anybody have any major questions before we leave this one then? I apologize for the delay, I'm just trying to move
I
forward.
think we'll be all right.
Okay, so I guess we will move to the capital improvement plan update, item 4.
So you should have 3 different spreadsheets, and mostly focusing on water, wastewater, and electric. What I thought I would do is just kind of quickly go over the water capital plan. If you remember from our, I think it was our March 4th or March 9th meeting, I can't remember which, Brown and Caldwell presented their findings from the condition assessment work. We worked with Brown and Caldwell to prioritize and figure out how to manage those projects so that they fit with the revenue stream in each enterprise fund. So as an example, and some of these were in the previous CIP, some of them are new, some of them were in the CIP undefined, and some of them we know the definition now. And as an example, we had reservoir improvements in the CIP, but nobody knew what they were going to be yet. There was just a placeholder. So now that's been defined, So if you look at Water 21-101, we basically said in FY21 we need to get going with design, and those projects. In the case of that project, we decided, well, that project makes more sense to do as one project because you have to hire somebody that's going to do work, underwater, and it didn't make sense to separate the reservoir projects for the improvements that were required for those. So that one project in FY22 is one of the larger projects at $559,000 and some change. The 8-inch butterfly valve replacement is basically, programmatic, where we came up with a number that worked with the revenue stream in a way that was, wouldn't impact rates, and so we just split that up into a certain amount of the $200,000 a year, and it tied back to a certain number of valves being replaced per year, and I can't remember the number exactly, but I have that information. The El Dorado Valley Line PRV stations, obviously it's not necessarily new, but we pushed that out. ARV and backflow replacement, we did come up with some budget estimates. We pushed that out. There wasn't anything pressing with regards to that. The PRV on a line to service the National Park Service, that one became a higher priority in my mind. I actually went out to that the old pump station that the pipeline runs through, and it's a little scary. I think it's a safety issue, and so we're going to do two things there. We're going to actually talk to the Park Service and see if we can even eliminate that service, because maybe there's another way they can get water they need somewhere else. But it's not a lot of water, but it's very, very high pressure, and it's old pipe. So and then there is a very high pressure at airport in the lower end of Georgia that eventually we needed to take care of. We put that out in 250 or out in FY24. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around here, but that pretty much summarized what came out of the water side of the condition assessment. And if you remember correctly, they did more of a paper analysis on pipeline replacement, but we haven't been having significant failures. So, we had placeholders in the original CIP for ACP pipe replacement, but we really haven't had any ACP pipe failures. And so, in my mind, what's more important moving forward with regards to that type of investigation and determination of if and when we're ever going to need to start replacing that pipe is tied back to, tracking that data and making sure we're doing a better job of asset management, because we don't really have a formal asset management program, but we do have data that shows we don't have a lot of problems. So I wouldn't want to just start spending money on pipe replacement. But certainly it's something we need to keep an eye on moving into the future. If we start to see more breaks, then we need to start being concerned about it. But for now, and for the next foreseeable future, I don't see you spending a lot of money on pipe replacement. And that's a good thing.
Could we, on this one, we were pushing out till 2024, the PRV for airport and lower end of Georgia. Mm-hmm. Could we move that up into the FY 2021 budget by taking some of the closed money out of the ACP pipe replacement? It's going to be closed on this FY 20 budget?
It would be easier to move it to 22.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking, because with all the activity going on down at the airport, if they decide to put fire sprinklers in the hangars and run a main line into that airport, we're going to need to have some control on that pressure.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. We would also have to, we would, yeah, okay, we would also have to run it through the financial plan because we staggered these so there wasn't any impacts.
I'm sorry, but the project, the ACP pipe replacement, those funds were actually approved at council to move to the copper service replacement
In their entirety.
in their entirety. And also the 100,000 for the large meter. So when I said close there, on the next report, those two will actually show available budget 0, and the copper service replacement will show those funds being transferred there. So
And
those
then-
two
and-
things they've already been allocated.
Okay, and the one above it, the water line to El Dorado Valley, that is a close of 386,000?
Correct, and those are funds that could be, those will just stay in
Fund
that
balance.
water fund.
Okay, thank you.
So that's pretty much a summary on the wastewater CIP. Does anybody have any questions?
I guess one thing, if I had the other document with me, it'd be a lot easier, but the status with the new, it would have been helpful, I think, for this one to show what was new from what was in the old CAP.
Yeah, we talked about that too, so we'll clean that up a little bit. This is essentially what came out directly out of the financial plan from the consultant as we were working with them. So there's some small cleanup we still have to do.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is for right now, if I'm trying to understand correctly, so right now you really only have a few new, instead of new being all the way from the top to bottom, if you were to say this is new from what was suggested to be approved before we shut down a COVID.
Right.
And a good example is if we go to the electric, that one I'm pretty positive is new, is the pole replacement program.
Right.
So that one, if you just, so I think, and then there's another one, so I'd just like to go to that too, what the other new one was. But if you just said new, you wouldn't have new from top to bottom, you would have what, 2, 3 new ones.
Right, and a good example is the ones on the water. I mean, obviously the BC Parkway is not new. It was new in 2020, but it's not new going forward.
But it's not even new to the project. So I hear what you're saying. It's new from 2020 on.
Yep.
But it's not new compared to what we were discussing to be budgeted for.
I know what you're saying. Yep.
And so that helps.
Yep.
So instead of what we had a 7.8 in 2021 as an example, the last document we saw, and now we have a 9.1. So what are the new projects that make that up?
Right.
And that would be, I think is something, I'm missing something?
No, you're right. Yeah, there were a few years after we had that last meeting, FY21 did get larger, but going out, projects got smaller.
And things got moved around.
So yeah, we can actually just provide the one prior, I call it February. We can either show that one so you can see the difference.
Or just like I said, just anything
just say
that's
which
new
one
from
is-
that, just
yeah.
that column new would be helpful that way.
Yep.
Otherwise, column doesn't do me any good.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And you'll see this again attached to the financial plan at the next meeting.
So I guess so it was mentioned earlier, did I hear correctly that there is a freeze on capital for the next 6 months?
There is a freeze, and I don't think that's going to significantly impact the utility itself because we're a separate enterprise fund, so we don't have the same impact from a revenue perspective. But with the new FY20 projects, we'll start the in-house design, but we won't take them to council till after the first, most likely anyway. So we can still work on design side. But yes, there is a moratorium, I think was the term they used in the council meeting on, they wanted to get a better idea of impacts to revenue.
So
it's more of an issue with the general fund because they get the sales tax revenue. For us, the only real impact is on the water side, and we'll show you that at the next meeting as well. What we did was the finance directors regionally just took an estimate on what they thought the impact would be to sales tax, and we just applied the same percentage reduction to our quarter cents water and sewer revenue tax, our sales tax, and put that into the financial model. And so you'll see where we originally, when last time you saw it, we anticipated $1 million of revenue. Now we're expecting 600 million in $600,000 in FY21, 800,000 in FY22 to 24, and then hopefully up back to $1 million in the beyond years. So that really was the impact, is really to the water sewer side.
But most of the capital was actually covered by the lease funds, if I remember correctly.
No, most of it is from revenues. Most of it's from revenues. There is some covered, some projects
Well, it's
covered by lease.
1.5 at least, 1.5 million that was
Yeah,
covered from lease. And so for some of these, let me see, what do we got? We've got, so we're only, so I'm missing, well, we've got a carryover now. Again, that's where things are getting confusion, but we're looking at 500, and I thought that the leases were still covered about 1.5. I guess, so it sounds like the capital, but not the maintenance would necessarily be covered.
Right.
Because the capital is specific, the lease money is specific for capital.
Correct. And that's shown, you'll see that revenue line item shown in the financial plan for the leases.
Right.
You'll also show the reduction in the sales tax in the financial plan, and then also the reductions we did to operating, especially in FY21, because we cut operating for next year quite a bit. So
Okay. But I think
that's a good and bad thing. Hopefully it's temporary, and we did, and you'll see it, but we did cut maintenance significantly in some of the professional technical services. But starting in 22, we started ramping it back up because we didn't really want to impact maintenance going forward, because that wouldn't be a good plan. So really it's just FY21 that's being adversely impacted. But the good news is we still anticipate the same revenues, so we generate a little more cash.
Okay, because since we're talking about capital, I guess maybe I just look at the future agenda then and bring it up then. I'm just trying to make sure, because I think I can explain it here to get as a lead in. We had a great, I'll keep repeating with it, we had a great conversation on March 9th. We had great input from everyone. We were able to actually have a good discussion among the committee members. We were able to get into a little better detail on the projects. Right now, a lot of times, because I felt the same thing tonight, and it might have been partly my fault, I apologize if I did, but we were sort of scattered trying to get a certain amount of information across to our concerns, and it didn't seem to be that we had all our ducks in a row. When we had the discussion on the 9th, we were able to get at more of the finer points. And I'm thinking that's what I'd like to get back to. And if I understood, part of the freeze for the council might be that they want to make sure that, okay, this is the backbone, this is what we have to get done. And if it's discussed in this committee, then that would help. And once we get to our next items, we're going to talk about the report, then maybe we can get there. So that's what I'm trying to get at. I understand tonight is not really, we definitely don't have the time tonight, but I don't know if we have time next time, because next time with the report from the, well, I'll get into future, so make sure I'm not mixing my agenda items, but I want to go back into what we think we're going to do with the rate study and what that leads in with the capital.
Right, and to be clear, and especially on electric, because we spent a lot of time on it in March, what we revised here was taking into account the comments and feedback we got from the committee, and then we also we added some projects out in the future because we knew they were going to be out there as far as some upgrades, and then built those into the financial plan. So I feel pretty comfortable with that, and obviously with the water and wastewater, this is the first time you're seeing the cost associated with the projects that Brown and Caldwell identified. So this is kind of new to you guys.
Yeah, so if we actually saw the new, then it would make sure that this is brand new and not part of another project. That's
right.
So, because like I said, one of the 251, is that, what was or was it the 8-inch, is that brand new, or is that butterfly valve, or is that?
That's new.
Okay, so that would be helpful, because
Yep.
and was the PRV to the airport, is that new or is that old? One that was already in the queue, so to speak.
That was already in the queue in 20. I think the only thing we did that, either we left it the same or we may have moved it out. I can't remember exactly, but.
But that's what I'm looking for, because
Yeah.
then again,
You
if
see what the
it says
difference
new,
is.
then it says, okay, and then that shows me that Brown and Caldwell, that you put money
Right.
to what was suggested.
Right.
So,
And it is a little confusing because there was a line, like reservoir improvements, there was a line item that somebody before me had put in the CIP, but it was undefined. There wasn't an assessment done. We didn't know even what it meant. Now we know what it means, and it's a number that's been estimated and we can feel comfortable about.
so even though it was like on the CAP, this is a new aspect of it, and you have more information.
And correct.
And I think it would be helpful, even though you've gone over it, and we had Cardwell, it might be go over to say, okay, these are the projects we're rolling these over so we get to still continue an understanding what we're currently working on. And then in 21, these are the projects that we want to work on. And as we talked about on March 9th, okay, these are important. This is important to the backbone.
Yep.
And then that can be taken to the council to understand that these, and to the citizens to understand this is what has to be done.
Right. And I think the easiest way to do that, and we can talk about this more at the next meeting, is that package that would be tied to the financial plan, tied to the recommendations from the consultant, and just do it as a package because it's really easier to explain than when they're done independently.
So we should have enough time next meeting, and we'll discuss that, that's the last object, to sort of go over the rate and the capital, but it might have to be two separate agenda items, or it might just be one full item. It's hard to say.
It would probably be two separate, but they would be they would lead in. I would suggest we would do probably the capital first. That would lead into the financial plan, and that would lead into the rate recommendation.
Okay. Because I think a lot of the concerns that Greg has on making sure that we're not spending extra money, or we can include that in the project, or it gets included, then should fall out, hopefully, if I'm hearing you right, in the rate study. And if it's not, then Greg would have the opportunity to say, well, are we sure that money doesn't need to be included?
Right.
So does that help any, Greg?
Yeah, my basic concern is we're trying to get these projects on the CIP list, and the thing is, I don't want to get the cart before the horse. There's certain things that have to fall in chronological order in order to be able to do what our end goal is 3 years down the road. So if the critical path is 5 years down the road, but we need it before the 3rd year, we got a problem, because everything comes to a screeching halt. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I want to make sure that this conversion from the 4.1 kV to the 12 kV rolls nice. We got a count of 30 or 40% complete. We're a long ways off. So if we're going to demo out substation 2, for example, all that system has to be cut over. We have to have a tie, which we're going to have a tie to substation 3. And I'm thinking 5, is that it? That'll carry some of the load off of, yeah, okay. So those have to be done before we can kill that station, okay? And all that has to be taken care of. Well, the problem is if it's in year 2025, FY 2025, and we're talking about bulldozing the station in 2024, it's not going to work. Okay, and so that's the thing. We've got a pole replacement program we got to look at. Is that going to affect anything when we start tensioning these conductors up on these overhead old poles to sag some different gauge up there, and we wind up snapping some cross arms or something else happens? All that stuff has to be looked at, and we've got to basically assign a priority as to what goes first. And that's what I'm trying to get at from electrical. The water side's the same thing. If you're getting ready to take and consider and contemplate bringing a 12-inch line into the airport for potential fire protection in the hangars, you definitely want to have a pressure reducing valve or something to control the pressure, so when you close a valve at the airport, it doesn't hammer back all the way through the system and really cause some problems.
Right, so so this future will go a little bit more in the future items. That'll be our last agenda item. And then that's what I want to get to. I'm hoping we can, knowing how things are working, we won't be able to get there next meeting, but if we can get started and continue on with good discussions. And it's just trying to get where we can all discuss. I think we've all been trying to get our sea legs, so to speak, and understand what we can and can't do. And I was really impressed with that meeting. I'll keep on saying that. I'm just trying to get back to that we can get more information, and hopefully I think we can get there with that. So if there's nothing else on the Capitol, then we move forward.
I had one comment because they said there's going to be a moratorium on capital improvement, but it doesn't apply to the utilities. Is that correct?
They applied it to the utilities, but my point really was the revenue impact is more on the general fund side. So we've got ongoing projects right now, and we got projects we can start designing for next year in-house, but we couldn't take them to council until January to go start construction.
Okay.
And I don't think there's a significant impact there.
Okay.
On our end.
Well, the one
And if there's one we think we need to proceed with immediately, we'll go ahead and take it to council and explain to them why.
Well, if we can discuss that at next meeting, because that's going to be part of the rate process, that would be helpful. Because like the Buchanan overhead line is, I would hope we could, originally it was thought to be started before January, wasn't it? Or we still need more things to go that it won't happen?
No, we, as a part of the whole COVID issue, we pushed forward with a design portion or a pre-design portion, primarily to at least at a minimum get some level of understanding of the alignment, which, by the way, was a smart thing for us to do because we saved a number of poles. And there was a significant, I got to make sure I get my word right. There were significant concerns about if we delayed design, we were going to have some pretty heavy increases on pole costs. So we worked with the city manager to get that going. And so when we're at a level of comfort with the design, we'll come back to get the entire design build project approved by council. So,
but I think, like I said, just to make sure it's, to help clarify, the next meeting we have, when we talk more about capital, then we could hopefully discuss what 21 is, what the major projects, and if we need to start before January, should we take it before council?
Yeah.
And if the committee thinks it's the right thing to do, then that would be a report.
and that would be one we would probably would be at the top of the list.
Okay, so it's not, just help clarify to help prepare for next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, so go to item number 5, possible action, discussion of time scales for completing and drafting reports to update to the city council. Does anybody want to start with that? Do you have any comments, or I can start, but, okay. So I think the biggest thing in that one right now, so I think we can look at, which will lead into 6 also, but we have, so what we're just talking about, we have 3, I think we have 3 major items that we're probably looking at currently. One would be the rate, that's the number one, and because so we're hoping to complete that. Now, since we're talking about timescales and stuff, can I ask in this portion what you're looking at and what you need from us in time frame, month-wise and stuff like that?
Well,
for the rate study aspect.
we certainly, we've in some respects, we've bought some time because we know we don't have to do any rate increases. And typically we would try to do those starting with the fiscal year, but we have enough information, even if we move a few things around with the CIP, that it's not going to impact rates negatively. That being said, the consultants, burning up their contract and going through money. So at a point in time, we need to get to a conclusion and be ready to discuss recommendations, which I'm hoping we can do that in at the next meeting at a workshop. because I don't expect the committee to deliberate and come up with, be satisfied with the consultant recommendations, but we want to present them and give the committee time to consider and think about them individually. And then at the following meeting, I would hope we could actually make a recommendation to take to city council. So that would likely be in August.
Oh. Okay, and I guess that's one thing. So you're looking at a 2-phase, and I guess I need to understand if it's a 3-phase. And again, trying to make sure within the open meeting laws that we have all the aspects ready. If we have a meeting in July and all the information is brought, we ask questions, et cetera, then we would have, I guess anything going forward to council would be are you looking at a draft to go to council, or are you looking at a final report to go to council?
Well,
Or the rate report, not our report, the rate report.
I would see that just being a recommendation from this committee on what we want to do with rates, and rate structure, a little bit of rate structure.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say, the final report is, my understanding is that there was 3 phases, I thought, or at least 2 phases to the consultants aspect. There was a draft. They were going to put a draft out. We were going to comment. Whether the council was commenting on that or not, I don't know. And then there was going to be a final report. That's what I'm talking about. So saying this is their aspect, so we would tweak it. So if I'm understanding correctly, we would have, the next meeting would be what they're suggesting.
Right.
And it's a draft report. And then,
correct.
And then we would have the time to comment on that, to have input to a final report.
Right.
And the final report was what would be from the rate consultant to the city council.
Right.
And then we would theoretically have a report from the committee to what, either saying we agree fully with the report, or we think this, or this type.
Yeah, because there's no guarantee everybody's on the same page, right? I mean, we just don't know yet. So,
we don't know yet. So
and there are some policy decisions to be made with that. So those policy decisions could lead to making some other revisions. So that's, there's a little bit of that's going to be in the middle of this with regards to cost of service. And they may, either this committee or the council could even have a little bit of different idea based on what the consultant provides as a recommendation. So that's why I think it's got to be at least 2 meetings. It could be 3.
That's what I'm afraid of, because I think I could sort of see the way that I'm trying to find a better way that we can get the communication from the committee that we need, and to get the discussion that we haven't so far had. So I don't see that we would be able to get a report finalized in 2 meetings, because basically you're finalizing a report in 1 meeting. Because you're going to get the information in July. You're going to be saying, this is what the consultant comes back with, this is what this committee understands, this is what the committee would like to agree on, and we would have to have time in August to discuss it. I don't see that we would have time to discuss and to make a final action. I think it's more of a discussion, and then the final action would have to come, unless you have 2 meetings, which if COVID doesn't stop it, we might be able to do that.
Right, and there's no immediate need to make any changes now to any of the rates or any of the rate structures. It could be that the recommendation is effective FY21 or FY22 going forward. So it's not like we don't have time. I'm just trying to manage the consultant and their scope of work and their contract.
Could we make, this is just spitballing or throwing out an idea, let's make the July meeting a workshop,
And that's what the plan is.
and then make the following meeting a formal meeting. And then on the 3rd meeting, if we have to come back with a workshop, we can come back to a workshop. Or try to cram a workshop in the back end of August.
So the other option that I was contemplating, and so I'm glad you brought that up, Greg, is because it's tied to policy issues, obviously this committee's not the one that has to make that final decision, right? It's city council. So I like your idea of a third workshop, but maybe that's a joint workshop with city council.
And I think that would be, I think that's a good idea.
Because really, you don't know where they are, right? And they haven't seen all the information that you've seen unless they've been watching these meetings, and so.
But the reason I'm saying this is we found out before COVID struck us down that the workshop was one of the most productive get-togethers we had.
Yep.
And if we can get the workshop in July and we can get the consultant in here to bring in his final pitch and we can ask questions, we can talk about it. Then we can say, hey, as a committee, we'll accept this proposal, and then we have to go through and make a report. So that's why I'm saying a workshop, a regular formal meeting, another workshop, and then we'll present them on the fourth go-around with our proposal written as to the committee's recommendation as to the hiring of the consultant, and if we concur with the recommendations, then they need to be tweaked.
Yeah, so the fourth would be the proposal to the council, because I'm trying to work with you, Dennis. I agree with you saying. So what I'm trying to say is that the first two meetings, the next two meetings would be with the consultant. And then,
correct. Then
theoretically, we could if you're thinking the same thing, we could possibly let the consultant go, or wouldn't need them back anyway, how we could figure out how to manage that. Then it would be more of the committee debating. We got all the information. We asked our questions on July. We've asked our questions in August, and now we need some more time to debate. But we've allowed you to sort of say, okay, we're done with you right now.
Yeah, and we wouldn't, and I'm not even necessarily saying that we're done with them. We just got to manage as we get towards the end.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to think. And hopefully, so I'm agreeing with saying the same thing Greg is I think that works well, but we can work with you as far as managing the money and managing, and I don't think we necessarily need them to come out in the third meeting necessarily.
I wouldn't think so. They should be able to provide, unless there's a significant, but they should be able to respond to questions essentially on the spot for the most part. So I wouldn't think they'd have to be here for the third meeting.
Okay. So, because the other thing too is that three ways to look at it. Well, I guess the first way is that was anything done on the report that the draft report that we were getting ready to do for the council? I believe we had different input given to your office, Dennis, and then was there some stuff that was going to be gathered together with COVID?
Yeah.
Was that sort of had to be dropped?
We probably need to resuscitate that. I know because George did work on it, and as well as you, Larry, and I think we combined them. So we kind of combined those documents. We probably just need to push it out to you guys. And
it depends on if you can push it out to everybody or if you want to push it just to me, and
okay.
I'll look at it and push it back to you, and then you can push it back out. We can see how much of it's still usable and how much got dropped because it was mostly towards this budget year.
Right.
But I think what now is that the importance of how fast we put a report to them is that do we need to say that we agree that certain projects need to be started before January 1st, and then we would be able to help with that, and we'd want to report out early, or are we just going to do a report saying that as the capital projects going forward, we understand and we agree with this, and here's the rate aspect that we also agree with?
I think that combination you just mentioned would be the best, personally.
Then, okay, so then I think, yeah, if we take the report and I'll take it on as a just to see where it's at,
right.
And I can either bring it back or something just to say this is going to work, or no, we'll just work with the new aspect, and it'd be more based around the rate study, which then includes the capital. You seem to have a question.
No, I'd be confused with which reports. There's several things going on at once. There was a report on the capital plan and a report on the rate study. Are those the same thing now? Or are they?
Yeah. What he mentioned and I agreed with was combining that into a report.
Oh, I'm not totally convinced about it. They seem like different. I mean, there obviously is overlap. I'm not trying to make extra work, but it seems like they're different things, or I don't know. Maybe it's if I'll go ahead with what other people want to do, but
well, to me they're fairly important as being tied together because it's really how we're we're managing the projects to not overly impact the rate.
Teacher. But we can have chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 of a report. We don't need to generate 3 separate reports.
Correct.
Okay, we've already done ours before the COVID hit, so that one's done. So the rate report is the next one we'll be working on. That one's done.
Well, ours isn't done. You and I did a draft, and it's sort of
Right,
floating
and
in.
that's what I'm saying, so we kick that back out to,
But that's our workshop project, okay, in July. We've got that, we've got the rate study, and we can talk more freely during that period as a workshop than an actual formal meeting.
So I agree with that. If we divide our report into 2 separate parts, one on the CIP and one on the rates, that I'm on board with. That's kind of what you're saying, isn't it?
Okay, that's what I meant to say. So
Oh, I
if it
misunderstood
wasn't,
then.
because what I was saying is that instead of putting 2 or 3 reports out,
just do one.
we would just do 1 report with chapters. That's great with me. But I just didn't know if we needed one out by August to say we need something started in September for a capital or November type thing.
Right.
Or do we just wait until most likely September or so before we can actually get a refined report out?
If we can get the consultant out here in July, if he's allowed to fly, or we can do a video conference.
I did check on that, and he is allowed to fly.
Okay.
And we had a long conversation, and it's a lot of information, and we both agreed that they need to be here. So, and they're fine with that. They understand how we're running the meetings. They're comfortable with flying.
See, the problem is right now with our CIP report that we put out before the COVID, FY21 will already be in play. By the time we get to the July meeting, so all we're doing is we're doing a summary. So now what we got to do is we got to get to this doggone report that's going to be as to the rate study. And if the rate study is leaning towards the way I feel it's leaning, the citizens of Boulder City, if you put it in size 21 font on the Boulder City paper, they're going to be jumping for joy because it's going to be no rate increases. Okay, so they're going to be jumping for joy. The problem is, in the same thing, you give them the grid news and then you hit them with the news, well, but we've got some problems in town that we've discovered on several different studies that's been done, and we need to inform you of this. We don't anticipate needing any more funds for it. We've got everything covered, but this is what's going to be happening in your town. The biggest problem I've had sitting at the cup in the morning was the people that come to me and kvetch about that 69V pole, the KV pole line going down Nevada Way to Hemingway Valley. I said, give it a couple of years, it'll patina out really nice, and you'll just love the look on it in the evening. Okay? The biggest problem, like I was talking to him back there, is now we've got all this beautiful equipment, how do we control it? Okay? Because you're actually literally going to backfeed the data from where it's coming from now through a whole different circuit. You're going to go to Boulder City Tap. If you shut off the line at the corner of Buchanan and Adams coming up from Meade Sub, now all your data and relay protection has to be bidirectional, not just one way, bidirectional. So all that stuff has to be done. And I hate to say it, and you'll agree to me, it has to be tested. So guess what that means? Hey, Boulder City, on this day of this time, about this time period, we're shutting everything off. Get ready for it. And then if it doesn't come back because we've got a relay problem, then we got some real fun.
Well, we tested shutting it off a month or so ago. So.
An actual yeah.
I got a phone call all the way into LA on that one. What could you do?
We can talk about it after.
Yeah, we got to, okay. So I think I think we're pretty much on the same page here. So is there anything, because I'll go into future, well, I think it goes into both, so I'll just quickly. Right now, I think for these tasks that we're trying to complete, the timescales and stuff like that, we're looking at the rate, the capital, and the report to council. So I think the major of those three things. Am I missing anything?
Nope, that is correct.
Okay, and so then that will lead into the next, try to figure out what our agendas need to be for the future, I think. But we can focus on it, I think, but capital is going to be a complicated issue, so.
Yeah, and I'd like, to me, that July meeting, we focus on those.
Correct.
With the workshop.
That's what I'd love to do,
Yep.
yes. So I appreciate that. Okay. Yeah.
I think the water and sewer is simple enough, and we'll have some pretty pictures and all that stuff. So
Okay.
I don't think it's maybe not I think the capital is going to be easier than the second part. Let's put it that
Well, do we need to bring somebody in on the water side?
We can have Brown and Caldwell here for answering questions.
Or even somebody
for
from the
sure.
city? Because,
It's not a problem. They're local. They're easy to have here.
okay. Because we've had help from the city, and I've appreciated that. And that greatly helped in the March 9th meeting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so so the give and take we were able to do was different than we had, and so that's what we're
Right.
trying to get
No, I
back
agree.
to.
And you didn't have the same ability with COVID that you did with that March meeting. So we can do that as part of that meeting
Okay.
with the water and sewer.
Yeah, so, and I think that will give the council some comfort on things that need to be done in 2021, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes.
So that's the thing there. Okay. Any other comments on item 5 then? So on the last thing then, if you would send me the combined report, whatever you guys had, and then I will look at it and see if it needs to be combined more, tweaked a little bit more, and I'll send it back to you, and then I guess send it to the committee before the next meeting? How do we do that? How do we do that part?
We would just put it on the agenda. Well, it depends on what you want to do with it. So at that next meeting, if you wanted to discuss it, it would need to be on the agenda.
I'm not sure what we're just.
But if you're just reviewing for now, you could just send it out to them.
It's more of a chapter. We're looking at it as a chapter, I think.
The next meeting needs to be a workshop.
And it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the one thing that has to be identified. Okay, that it's a workshop.
Right.
So the rules of a workshop are different than a formal meeting.
Yep.
Okay, so in other words, that's what I was waiting for you to say, is the next meeting in July a formal or a workshop?
No, next meeting's a workshop.
Okay,
That's what I understand, right? We all agree, because
That's the plan.
So even because we might only have one meeting in July is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
And that would just be a workshop.
Yep.
And then I believe, and you're correct, we'll need a formal meeting in August, and then a workshop associated with that. So that would be, so let's get to the future agendas and we'll iron that out, make sure it's clear. But I just wanted to, since there's still some problems with me emailing the whole group, the whole committee, yeah, they need to send it back to you.
I would send it back to me and then we'd send it out.
Okay, but I think we can
That's
send it to the
safest.
committee not as part of the package, because it's not necessarily the report we're gonna go with, it's like just a chapter.
Right.
And so this is what, let's say I trim it down, because we trim out some of the budget stuff and say, this is no longer valid, this is what we're moving forward with, and this is how we're gonna start a chapter type thing. And then
Right.
that would just give it back to the group, and then so I don't know if we'd even discuss it, that would be, when we'd be discussing the report later.
we've got two things that are priority in July. Number one is the abandonment of the FY '21 fiscal budget work, CIP, that we started working on and it got shut down. That has to be completed as a task. Then we got to bring the guys in from Midwest that are going to talk about the rate study. Okay? Those can be handled in the July meeting as a workshop, because there's going to be a lot of questions back and forth, and the formality is not as strict in a workshop it is in a formal meeting. So we get those two items done, right? And then the only thing we're missing out of our 3-chapter report is chapter 3, which is, yes, we agree with the rate study consultant's ideas and report, or we want to tweak it. Okay? And then that, to me, that would have to come to an actual formal vote. Because as a committee, we have to vote on accepting the rate study that they've done as a formality with some revisions. Or we just say we accept it as it is, because if you have the workshop before, they can fix the document before it comes for a formal meeting.
So then so just finish off, I'm sorry, I'll repeat myself one more time. Just send the report to me, and I will try to get something back to you, but
And we'll
it
sit
doesn't
down.
necessarily have to be before the next meeting, because we really don't plan to discuss it, just a matter of getting it back, and it'll be just a sort of a starting point for the report. So instead of losing what we've already had, see what we can use is basically a starting point.
And my recommendation is we totally focus on capital rate study at the workshop.
Exactly. So so now we're going, so we can stop 5 and go to 6, and then we can iron out this last part we just talked about. So, okay, so is anything else on 5? Okay, so we're closing down 5, go into 6. So our item number 6 is for possible action, discussing the future agenda items. So what I'm hearing is let's just do a really quick one for next to the workshop. So the workshop, Josh, do we need to approve the minutes? And is that part of a workshop, or do we do that in August?
Let me ask the city clerk on that one, and I'll send you an email in the morning.
Okay, because I'm just saying whether we add that or not.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
for
saying.
the next agenda.
Because we're going to have such a small agenda, we can just set it up right now if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we'll find out about that.
Yeah,
So
we'll see if that's possible. If it's possible, we'll add it.
If not, we'll
we'll just do it in August.
We'll just do it in August. And then I don't mind if it can go to August if it can. If it can go to August, we
Right.
might do that way. Especially depending on how quick a turnaround we're going to have the next meeting in.
Right.
So then we're going to have, so we want the rate report first, don't we? Because I think we want, so that your second agenda item, or the first, is going to be your rate study group presentation.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
And then,
they correlate so much, it probably doesn't matter whether it's capital first or.
so I guess as
city.
long as before I say agree to the agenda, if we come in on the day of the workshop and people want to switch it, we can do that as long as we do it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so the item 1, I mean, the next 2 items, first would be a study, the second would be the capital.
Yep.
And we need that to be a discussion.
Correct.
It has to be a discussion.
And we could do it similar to what we did in March.
Correct. I don't think we need possible action on that. Does anybody see a reason we'd want possible action? Because that would be a vote, and I don't think we're ready for a vote. Okay.
I don't even think you could do votes at workshops.
Okay, thank you for then confirm it. So then, but just want to, because right now 3 and 4 didn't have discussion on them. I think it's safer if we just put the word discussions on it. So presentation, I guess, and discussion for the rate study, just to make sure there's no confusion. Presentation and discussion of the capital program. And then I guess we just do our, being a workshop, do we put 5 and, we can put 6, we need 6 in there, our current 6, but do we need the time scale and completing the draft reports type, that number 5 in there in the workshop?
That comes to Robert's Rules of Order. I don't think the workshop is that formal, but timescales and study, we're going to be doing that in the workshop. And then, what comes out of the workshop is the final product that's going to be recorded and put to the test, in other words, in the next meeting, because we have to vote about approving the minutes on the workshop.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and the workshop's going to get the ball rolling with the public because they're going to see recommendations from the rate consultant.
But we'll put it down, so make sure we're saying, we'll put it down there so we're covered, so there's no confusion.
Right.
So the agenda items that we currently have is 5 and 6, we would just add on to that agenda item for next time also. Because like you said, pretty much, we're just going to, most of the time, if not 100%, we'll just keep those on there anyway.
Right.
It helps us. And the other one, like I said, I think the capital, we might as well just figure out, that's almost, some form of the capital is going to be on there every time too.
So
So,
for this committee, capital plans change.
right.
So in February of next year, we may be making changes. The nice thing is we'll have a financial model, so before we make a change, we know what the impact is.
Okay, we have a little leeway at 6 o'clock or not? Because, well, we've got comment periods, so if I'm going to do a comment period, I got to stop right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I had one item I don't know if I have time to mention it.
No, we don't, not with the comment period. Can you add it afterwards, or is there anybody on the line? Because otherwise, if we have a little bit of flexibility, we can do it, but if we have to have comment period, we got 2 minutes.
Well, let's
They have to be able to wipe down this room before anybody else.
so let's just go to public comment period if we can.
Sorry about that.
And open it up for public comment, and if you could mention the number,
Okay,
the
good.
phone number.
Okay, so the last comment period of the night, and basically anything can be, well, I don't even got time to read it, so I'm just going to read the number.
Yeah, just read the number.
And the call-in is 702-589-9629. And we will give you 1 minute for technical difficulties. Okay, I'm going to give you till 20 more seconds, 15 seconds. Give me 30 seconds to close the meeting. Okay, we're gonna close the comment period, and I make a motion to adjourn the meeting. I get a second?
So moved.
Okay. All ayes?
Aye.
So be done, any nays? Okay, so we are adjourned.
Yeah, we have to clean rooms between meetings now.
Okay.